Welcome to CBC Windsor News at 6. I'm Meg Roberts. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. Charges against a Windsor woman who police identified as leading the Freedom Convoy at the Ambassador Bridge have been dropped. We have more details on that tonight. Plus, a Chatham-Kent resident is concerned for her health after delayed appointments due to the hospital's ransomware attack. She wants to know why the most vulnerable are still waiting, and an extra tug from the Coast Guard today has freed the freighter stuck at the bottom of the Detroit River. The criminal case against a person police say co-organized the Ambassador Bridge blockade has been dropped. The CBC's Chris Ensing has the details.
The Crown Attorney's Office has dropped its case against Nicole Dickerdeco. She was charged by Windsor Police for mischief and named as one of the co-organizers or co-leaders of the Ambassador Bridge blockade that happened back in February of 2022. That's when protesters shut down this area for 7 days, blocking traffic from entering or exiting the country. Police said at the time that the charges are the result of significant investigative work that took a tremendous amount of effort. Today, the Ontario Court of Justice confirmed that those charges have now been withdrawn. Windsor Police also named and charged William Laframboise as a co-organizer alongside Dickerdeco. Those charges are for mischief. He's previously told CBC News that he was at the protest but denied organizing any of the events. He said since being charged, he's received death threats. Laframboise wants his case to go to trial. His next court appearance is scheduled for February. The blockade at the Ambassador Bridge lasted 7 days, with experts saying it halted or stalled billions of dollars in trade before hundreds of police officers cleared the protest after a court injunction. At the time, protesters said that they were out in full force against both the federal and provincial vaccination mandates that were put in place because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Presenting CBC News, Windsor.
As hospitals continue to recover from a ransomware attack, a woman in Chatham wants to know why some of the most vulnerable are still in limbo. It's now been more than a month since the attack took place, but as CBC's Jennifer Lagrassa reports, some care still remains stalled.
Why can delays be harmful or be hard for you?
That's when bad things happen. That's what I believe.
Lynn McCarricker has struggled with her mental health for nearly 20 years. She has bipolar depression, anxiety, and seasonal affective disorder. She regularly sees a psychiatrist who works at the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance. But her appointment at the beginning of November was canceled because of the ransomware attack last month. She says she was told that she couldn't talk to her doctor on the phone and that they'll call her to rebook.
I started a new medication and it has helped, but I still need to be followed. It's been hard because I worry a lot. That's part of my illness.
In a text message, a spokesperson for the hospital said they can't get into patient details, but that doctors might cancel appointments if they don't have all of the information. They'll do their best to reschedule as fast as possible. The spokesperson says that staff are under greater than normal stress, and they ask that the public be understanding. But patients like McCarricker feel like they're being ignored.
The most vulnerable people in the community are relying on ER services, and we're not getting that help that we need.
One Windsor psychologist says delays can be harmful, especially for patients who feel like they're in crisis.
Symptoms can get worse over time if people are, not addressing them. So what we like to see is service that is more timely because it's more effective.
In an email, psychiatrist Gail Robinson at Toronto's Sunnybrook Hospital said with bipolar disorder, she would want to check in weekly with a patient after starting a new antidepressant, as it can cause a switch into a manic episode.
I just worry if I were to take a turn for worse and need to go to the hospital, what would happen? Would they be there for me?
Jennifer Lagrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
There's some scrutiny about whether or not hazardous materials have been crossing the Ambassador Bridge as the company tries to get permission to allow those goods to be transported over. An American trucker has posted videos on social media showing trucks with hazardous material placards. The CBC's Dale Molnar has more.
Got another one. Ryan Stewart is a trucker from Lake Orion, Michigan. He posted this video of a truck with a flammable liquids placard the week the hazardous goods truck ferry ceased operations in September. He posted this video of another truck with hazardous goods placards a few weeks earlier.
Yeah, the one instance was just they had corrosive placards on the truck, and I was in line at the customs booth heading to Canada, and I don't know who's supposed to enforce those rules, but they didn't have any issue getting across, and they just went on down here on Church Street. The second time was a flammable and corrosive placarded truck, and it was on all sides.
Stewart says truckers are supposed to remove the placards after they have delivered their loads. He says it is possible that truckers in these cases forgot to remove them. However, if the hazardous materials in question are on the trucks, they are violating a ban on those substances on the bridge. CBC News cannot confirm whether the trucks are carrying hazardous goods. A spokesperson for Challenger Motor Freight says that particular trailer never transported hazardous goods this year. And he says when they do transport restricted materials, they use the Blue Water Bridge in Sarnia where it is allowed. Paul Weatherby writes, "We do not transport restricted materials across the Ambassador Bridge. After an internal review of the trailer records, it has come to our attention that the load in question, which raised concerns, was improperly marked." He goes on to say they apologize for the inconvenience. CBC is attempting to reach the other trucking company. Stewart is concerned about the bridge's efforts to get permission to allow certain hazardous goods to cross.
The Ambassador Bridge being the busiest border crossing between Canada and the USA, having that, damaged or eliminated would be very, very detrimental.
MP Brian Massey agrees and says the bridge should be monitoring the trucks.
The reality here is that, the Ambassador Bridge has to take command of its operations as a private border crossing.
Massey is fighting the bridge's efforts to get the state of Michigan to lift the ban on flammable liquids and corrosive materials on the bridge. He called on the federal government today to deny the bridge request when it comes to Transport Canada.
Will this government not cave to the billionaires' greed to keep people safe and to keep the ban on?
Housing Minister Sean Fraser said he would sit down and discuss the matter with Massey. CBC has reached out to Transport Canada, which enforces the regulations on the bridge, as well as the bridge itself. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
That freighter stuck in the Detroit River was freed this afternoon. The Barbro G ran aground just after 7:30 yesterday morning. Windsor's harbor master breaks down what happened.
The other day we had a bit of a wind. The ship was about to leave to go to its next location, and one of the thrusters on the vessel failed to operate. So what happened was it somewhat loses steerage. It's like a big piece of plywood trying to carry it across the 401 in a windstorm. It's not going to move very quickly. So it got caught, got pushed into the mud. The bottom of Detroit River is like a tube of toothpaste. Is once you put something solid in it, sticks. And that's what happened to this.
Here's a time lapse of that ship being freed. Once it was, the freighter still wasn't on its way, waiting for an inspection and approval before continuing its journey. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, there's been no pollution, injuries, or disruption to commercial traffic. The 190-meter freighter is carrying around 19,000 tons of wheat destined for Italy, grain that will make its way across the Atlantic Ocean in December to arrive just in time for the holidays. Windsor's harbor master says this isn't anything new. Over the last 5 years, they've seen multiple groundings in the river. The Essex Region Conservation Authority is set to get some funding from the city of Windsor, but not as much as they'd hoped, and it sparked plenty of debate.
Your administration is running the business of this city. As your watershed manager, I'm running the business of your watershed. And our responsibilities somewhat overlap, but are extended. And I take gravely serious my responsibility to this municipality as my largest member municipality.
I think it's a short-sighted view of how we should approach funding the Conservation Authority. There's a lot of reasons why we need to look at giving the Conservation Authority the flexibility to deploy the funds that are made available to it through all of the municipalities.
We've heard from our financial CEO that not only are we going to put it in a very strictly monitored reserve account, but if the occasion rises, we're going to be there.
The city opted out of paying for some conservation programs deemed non-mandatory by the province. And in 2 cases, council opted to fund less of the program or not at all. In rural watershed monitoring, the city gave about $1,700 instead of the $17,000 requested. In land acquisition, it funded 0% of the nearly $250,000 asked for. The city will use some of the money it saves to fund future IRCA land purchases. The city did approve funding for tree planting and the John R. Park Homestead, among other IRCA programs. A vacant home tax proposal also received council's approval last night. The tax will apply at a rate of 3% on vacant homes. It's designed as an incentive to make homeowners either sell unoccupied homes or rent them to help combat the city's housing shortage. According to staff, a home will be declared vacant if it's unoccupied for more than 183 days in a taxation year. According to a city-run public consultation earlier this year, almost 75% of residents who responded to the survey supported a vacant home tax. Council approved the recommendations with the addition of having staff report back to council in 1 year on the effectiveness of the tax. Windsor's mayor has weighed in on foreign workers at the new electric vehicle battery plant. Up to 900 South Koreans are set to install equipment at the Windsor site next year. The mayor said it's not a new concept.
I think we all have to admit that there is some very, highly skilled, technical, proprietary equipment that is coming here to be installed in this plant, equipment that I've seen in installation in Poland, that you would have specialized skill to do this work. Not every one of those, not every job that's in that plant could be done by a Windsorite. There's just some things that make sense to bring the installers of the company who's making the equipment. This will ebb and flow over the course of the next couple of years, and so as different equipment is installed, you will have certain numbers of people moving back and forth. Some will come here and they'll keep moving until they have all of those factories built.
The issue remains a hot-button topic on Parliament Hill. Conservative MPs on a federal committee are demanding that the Liberal government reveal details of Canada's contract with Nexstar Energy. The committee is scheduled to resume to debate on Thursday. Windsor's electric vehicle battery plant is expected to be operational in 2025. Provincial money is on its way to our region to help with some damage from summer storms. Ontario announced today that Essex and Lakeshore residents in certain areas are now eligible for funding from the Disaster Recovery Assistance Program. The eligibility is meant to address the heavy rainfall and flooding parts of the region saw in August. Applicants to the program can ask for help with repair costs, emergency expenses, and property replacement that wasn't covered by insurance. The program is available to homeowners, tenants, owner-operated small businesses, small farms, and non-profit organizations. Those eligible can apply for a maximum of $250,000. The deadline to apply for the program is March 27th, 2024. More hostages are being held by Hamas in Gaza have been released. 12 people have been freed, according to the Israeli military and the Red Cross. The group includes 10 Israeli women, one under the age of 17. There are 2 Thai nationals as well. Israel is releasing 30 Palestinians it has been holding in jail, 15 women and 15 teenage boys. Hamas still has about 150 captives who were taken during the October 7th attack on Israel. Talks aimed at continuing the current Israel-Hamas ceasefire beyond tomorrow are ongoing in Qatar. Earlier today, the 2 enemies accused each other of a serious violation. There was an exchange of fire between troops and militants in northern Gaza. The war between Israel and Hamas has triggered demonstrations all over the world. Now, a movement known as Boycott, Divest, Sanctions, or BDS, is calling for a global day of action tomorrow. It's being called the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Organizers hope to influence government action by targeting businesses. CBC's Anis Hadari explains.
Protesters have been targeting businesses in North America, trying to put financial, economic, or political pressure on institutions here to influence the situation in the Middle East and the fight between Israel and Hamas. Take Scotiabank, where protesters are challenging investments in an Israeli weapons company. It's part of what activists call the BDS movement. boycott, divest, and sanction companies that are tied to Israel's actions in the West Bank or Gaza. The idea is that the financial consequences from companies pulling out of those areas could influence Israeli policy.
You're putting pressure on companies that they just want to make money, and yet they are being, protested for their partnership, for their complicity in what the Israeli government is doing.
It's a tactic used against other countries in the past, for example, South Africa in the late 20th century. And while pro-Palestinian groups don't agree, others call these protests anti-Semitic and say they're targeting Jewish-owned businesses.
If somebody wants to protest the Israeli government, there are Israeli government representatives in Canada at an embassy and at consulates that are the address for protest.
Regardless, some research has shown that these boycott campaigns may not work as intended.
Activists do have obviously lists of companies that you should boycott. I think that is part of the intention to change the behavior of consumers. I think the reality, though, is that people are not always willing to follow through on those intentions.
Where BDS could shift a company's behavior is if its reputation is threatened, but that may not be working in this case. For example, Scotiabank hasn't changed course on investments. Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
The education minister announced today a change to the high school history curriculum to reflect a tragic period in Ukraine's history.
To stand up for democracy and to educate young people on the perils of communism and extreme ideology. I am very proud to announce that Ontario will mandate, for the first time in our country's history, mandatory learning on the Holodomor within Ontario's curriculum, so that all kids learn from history to never be bystanders in the face of evil.
The genocide is a result of policies of the Stalin regime and killed millions of Ukrainians between 1932 and 1933. The topic will be taught as part of the Grade 10 Canadian History course starting in September 2025. Well, another chilly day out there today with current temperatures sitting at around -3 degrees. We have your full weather forecast coming up after the break. Well, just hours ago, LaSalle police posted these photos from the town's tree lighting ceremony on Friday. And I'm sure law enforcement didn't plan on being so busy, but one of the guests was up to no good. That's the Grinch getting arrested, of course, with the police having some strict words for the man in green, although I don't know how much the Grinch absorbed based on that sneaky grin. A much friendlier character also in town, Santa, was also seen with police hanging out. This weekend is Windsor's Santa Claus Parade. It's happening this Saturday with the parade kicking off at 6 p.m. downtown. Colette, as you know, I have a major soft spot for the Grinch, so I don't think that was fair treatment. Exactly. Now, I do love going to holiday parades. My favorite part, I think, is all the dancing and the singing. I always love the, the marching bands and all the dance clubs. That's my favorite.
Yeah, I love it when there are big floats. And when there's just a little wind, they can still have the big, blow up balloon things and whatever, and they dance a little bit too, but not so much wind that anyone's in danger or of them taking off. The poor Grinch. I think he's out on bail now. Well, I don't know if we should let him. Look at this. Look at this cold air, the very Grinch-like that's come down across the Great Lakes. It's milder in the prairies, and we've got all the cold air. That cold air pressing across those Great Lakes puts the snow squalls in motion. And the areas in pink are all the areas where the warnings are in place. They're going to shift further north. Just be aware if you're traveling. And so these areas go into a watch, and still some winter weather travel advisories too. Now, a closer look at southwestern Ontario. If you just stay in put, doing okay. We did get a little bit of a dusting of snow, and in fact, in some cases, it's a bit more than that. I saw between about 2 and 5 centimeters between Windsor, LaSalle, Tecumseh, kind of through the region. And then a little bit further south towards Amherstburg, well, a little more significant there with more than 10 centimeters. So, yeah, some flurries just in the forecast tonight and into the day tomorrow. Those temperatures, look how cold, -3, but you put the winds into play and it feels like -8 to -10 a little bit further east. So it's a westerly flow, and then that's going to shift a little more southwesterly, picking up tomorrow morning as well. Some of the gusts will be to 50 or just over 50 kilometers an hour, but that kind of shifts everything that comes in across the lake. So we will have some cloud cover. We will see some scattered flurries, might get another dusting through the day on Wednesday, but once we can get out of that, things actually improve quite a bit as we head towards Thursday, and we're going to see those temperatures actually starting to warm up significantly. So overnight tonight, -7 to -8, those overnight lows, wind chills near -15. Forget about the -10 going to -15. Wednesday, yeah, we're still dealing with it, but look at Wednesday night. We recover pretty nicely, and boy, do we recover on Thursday. If you're looking for milder air, you're looking for some sunshine. The Grinch in jail Thursday, so everything's good. 8 degrees we're looking at, and then we will have a few systems bringing some messy mixed precipitation later in the week, Meg.
Yeah, that is quite a jump. Thanks so much for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
There's been a big win for an endangered species over the weekend. We share with you the efforts of a national park in Indonesia. A diplomatic spat is deepening between the UK and Greece. It comes after Britain canceled a meeting between the prime ministers at the last minute. It's part of a long-standing dispute over 2,500-year-old sculptures removed from the Parthenon in the early 19th century, widely known as the Elgin marbles. They're on display in the British Museum, and Greece wants them back. Dominic Valitis has more from London.
This row is deepening. Downing Street believed it had been given assurances that Greece's Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis would not raise the issue of the sculptures during his visit here to the UK. Indeed, officials at Number 10 said his meeting with the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was agreed on that basis, something which the Greeks are now saying is completely untrue. This all started on Sunday when Mitsotakis did an interview with the BBC in which he spoke of his distress that many of the Parthenon sculptures, as he knows them, remain in the British Museum and that they should be returned to Greece.
If I told you that you would cut the Mona Lisa in half and you would have half of it at the Louvre and half of it at the British Museum, do you think your viewers would appreciate the beauty of the painting in such a way? Well, this is exactly what happened with the Parthenon sculptures.
Words which appear to have angered Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who shortly after the broadcast went out, cancelled his meeting with Mitsotakis, which was scheduled for today. The Greek PM then declined a secondary offer from Downing Street to meet with Britain's Deputy Prime Minister before announcing he was cutting short his trip and heading home. And the two men had plenty to talk about in this meeting that was cancelled, not least of all the situation in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, and other pressing issues the two countries are facing, such as immigration. Both Britain and Greece, of course, have long-standing positions on the Parthenon sculptures, the Elgin marbles. Greece wants them returned and reunited in Athens at a specially constructed museum. The UK, meanwhile, insists they're part of a permanent collection at the British Museum and should remain here in the UK. We're still no closer to the situation being resolved. It has been going on for decades now. This diplomatic spat will hardly help matters. Dominic Valitis, CBC News, London.
A national park in Indonesia continues to charge into action to try and keep a critically endangered species from going extinct. The rare Sumatran rhino calf was born on the weekend. He arrived 10 days early. The calf hasn't been named yet, but his birth is a major moment for the species. Fewer than 80 Sumatran rhinos are believed to survive. Well, that's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website. Thanks so much for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you back here tomorrow night.